very well put together. I really congratulate you, in that. We got you down as an associate with that. But I'm really looking forward to showing a clip and talking about it. And welcome very much to our set. And welcome to you in the audience. A pleasure to welcome to the program Molly Cheshire, or Molly Rutledge Cheshire.
No, that's not actually my middle name, even though I am a Rutledge.
Oh, I see. It's not your middle name. But she's the friend, or she's the daughter of someone who we aired a month or so ago, John Rutledge Cheshire, who I think his book, destined to become a modern-day classic in terms of his work in terms of developing the shrimp industry, which I think that's a major contribution to human society. But Molly has been involved in the film world and so forth, and we're going to ask her to share some of that background, and she's been involved with the creation of a film that I guess was on NBC. We'll get the details of it and so forth, called The Mystery of the Sphinx, which is very interesting, and Molly, welcome so much to conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Share a little bit of your own background, just a way to wade in, and then we want to get to the, to the film and so forth, but share a little of your own background.
What exactly are you interested in?
I guess it would be more things that would relate to that. You're involved in the film industry in a way. You do grip work and that sort of thing.
I started out in the film business as a production assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And then, actually, I was living in New York, working up in the Catskills on a feature. That was my first feature. And then started out in the art department, then went to the grip department, moved to L.A., worked in the electrical department, then moved back to the East Coast, and I'm actually a union electrician.
Okay, really good. That's
Gaffer, too.
What does a gaffer do?
Well, an electrician does the lighting, and the gaffer is the head of the lighting department.
I see. Okay, that's very important in terms of major film production and so forth.
I mean, I've only gaffed a few small features,
right,
and a few commercials.
I see. You still got your hand in that way? Are you doing it more?
Well, my back basically said that lifting heavy objects was probably not a great career.
Okay, choice.
So,
yeah. Okay.
It's not that I don't do lighting anymore.
Yeah.
It's just that I try not to emphasize it. I never actually give up any careers. I just keep picking up new ones.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Just pick up more and everything. And I know you've got a wide interest in a wide variety of things, and you're one of the most interesting people I've met over a long decades of meeting very many interesting people. And you're in association with that wonderful Paula Gloria, and you've had adventures with her, and all of that is part of your biographical background. But what we want to talk about here is you became involved in the creation of the idea and the creation of a film called The Mystery of the Sphinx. You were involved in that. Maybe you could share that, because that's primarily what we want to talk about.
Well, actually, primarily my brother, who was an associate producer, and his business partner, who was the director, got involved with an Egyptologist who had done some record-breaking research on redating the Sphinx.
Yeah.
And he had worked in conjunction with a geologist who looked at the erosional features of the Sphinx and redated it according to science as opposed to just speculation.
Yeah.
And so what was fascinating about the documentary to me is that you could actually point at a much different date as far as the creation of the Sphinx. It's actually carved out of one piece of rock, amazingly enough.
Yeah, okay.
And the erosional features on the Sphinx are water erosion, which, when you see the clip, are dramatically different than the wind and sand erosion, which are on the other features of the Giza Plateau. And frankly, why don't we show the clip, and then we...
You want to show it now?
Yeah, let's show it now. And
well, then, okay, if you'd want... maybe we can put a couple names there. You had a man named West or something?
John Anthony West is what I would call renegade Egyptologist.
Renegade, or... Okay.
Well, merely because his theories really were in conflict with the academic canon. And so he was severely attacked, and he based his theory that maybe the Sphinx was much older on a very thick book by Schwaller de Lubitz. And just one line in it at the end says, you know, the erosion on the Sphinx looks like water. So just from that one line, he thought, wow, maybe I might have something here. So originally he took a photo of the Sphinx and masked off the head, and took it to a guy. I think it was in Britain. I don't. I think it was at the British Museum. And he showed it to him, and he says, "What kind of erosion do you think this is?" And the guy said, "Water erosion." And then when he unmasked the head, the man all of a sudden realized the implications of such a statement, you know, because it would redate the Sphinx 10,000 years earlier.
When there was significant
rainfall.
Yeah, okay.
And actually, you know, to really be correct, you'd probably push it back even further. But to be conservative, they said 10,000.
That's way back beyond what the canon accepts.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, as somebody said, where are the pot shards? Well, the important thing is it's not about pot shards. It's about looking at evidence.
Yeah, from scientific perspective.
From a scientific perspective. So the man from the British Museum would not go on the record to say this was water erosion, so that John West eventually found Dr. Robert Schock from Boston University, and he was willing, since he was tenured, and they couldn't fire him.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, everybody complains about the tenured system because you can't fire people, but there are advantages to it in that people can have independent research and not be fired just because they're politically incorrect. So
I think everybody it would be well if all of humanity was tenured.
Well, there's some people that it is annoying that you can't fire them if they're not doing their job, so to speak. You know,
well, okay,
I know a lot of incompetent professors. I mean, of course, present company excluded.
Well, yeah, but anyway.
But then again, I never took one of your classes.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it was odd, you know, because I got rid of authority. I wouldn't grade anybody, so that anybody who came, they were coming voluntarily. So that was just
a way to. What do you mean you wouldn't grade anybody?
No, they would come into the class. They'd say, "What do I do to be an A or a B or a C or something?" And I would just give everybody an A on the first day. And then I said, "That's it. I'll be here. If you want to come, you come." And they would go away. Glad they got their grade point average up to get into Harvard Business or something.
How did the school feel about that?
They can't stand that, because that's the organizing principle which society is organized, is the, you know, equipping people to fit into a thing where they'll respect authority and the structure and everything. But that's a whole other issue.
Well,
it gets into economics.
By that.
Yeah, and I used to get my class filled with all the smartest people on campus, because there was I wanted to get rid of any stick of authority. They're coming because that's where they want to be. I think it'd be good if everybody could be where they want to be, rather than what some system tells them they have to do in order to have some piece of bread to eat. That would be like having everybody have tenure or liberty.
Economics.
Well, yes, it gets to that. But that's all off on a whole other subject other than the Giza Plateau.
Anyway, so I'd love to show the clip just because it really demonstrates very dramatically what we're talking about, and then people will understand, you know.
Yeah, we can take that as a point of departure then and everything. We mentioned these. So let's see if we can't say, I guess it's only 3 minutes or so, but it'll just set the template. And so if we could run that tape now, please, George, if you'd run that tape, and then we'll come back. We're talking with Molly Cheshire.
On the easternmost boundary of the Sahara Desert, 6 miles west of Old Cairo, the Sphinx and surrounding pyramids rest on the edge of the Giza Plateau. 240 feet long, the length of a city block, 60 feet high, the height of a 6-story building. The Sphinx has the body of a lion and the head of a man. It was carved in one piece out of solid limestone bedrock. It rests in its own enclosure, facing east to catch the first rays of the rising sun. To a geologist, erosion tells the story of a rock's history. The limestone bedrock in Giza is like a layer cake composed of both hard and soft layers. The wind-driven sand scours out the softer layers, leaving the harder layers intact. An example of this is found here in the tomb of Debian, which is carved out of the exact same rock as the Sphinx. Once a smooth wall, it's been exposed to desert conditions for over 4,000 years. On the other hand, rain weathering has an entirely different look. Rocks which have been weathered by rain have a round, undulating profile. This is very different in appearance from the hard, sharp profile caused by wind weathering.
This is classic textbook example of what happens to a limestone wall when you have rains beating down on it for thousands of years.
It's only found in one area on the Giza Plateau, here, on the Sphinx and on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure. These man-made vertical walls were carved from the same layer of bedrock, a mere 300 yards apart. According to Egyptologists, they were carved at the same time. But if that's so, shouldn't they exhibit the same pattern of erosion? Schock was certain that the walls of the Sphinx enclosure were eroded by water cascading down off the Giza Plateau. Water whose only possible source was rain. This was the key element in Schock's argument. But when did it rain? In order to expose the body of the Sphinx, enormous blocks of limestone were quarried out. Block by block, the stone was removed as the lion's shape took form. These blocks were used to build the Sphinx and valley temples. Some of these blocks measure 30 feet long, 10 feet high, and 12 feet wide. They each weigh 200 tons. That's roughly the weight of a diesel locomotive. Nowhere else in all of Egypt are blocks this size used in the construction of temple walls.
200,000 tons is a lot of weight. How in the world did they do it? That's one question. But it's really interesting, the different erosional patterns.
But it's interesting because in the documentary, they tried to go out and find a modern machine that would actually be able to handle that kind of weight.
Couldn't find it.
And I think that they found some enormous crane that even for the crane it was a challenge to lift that kind of weight. And you know, as you can see from the animation, those huge things were carved out and then placed in front of it, and you can't even put a business card between them.
Right.
And I believe they're mortarless. You know, there's no mortar in between them.
They had the same thing at Cuzco.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, as I said, there's another book by Schock called The Voyage of the Pyramid Builders.
Schock was the fellow that we saw briefly,
Right. He was the geologist. Unfortunately, you didn't get a chance to see John Anthony West, but he's the one who really spearheaded all this research and won an Emmy for it.
You did. He won the Emmy for the research?
For the research. We were nominated for 2 categories, for Best Research and Best Special.
Could I mention, this was shown on NBC?
NBC.
A major production.
A major production.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it was originally financed by the Edgar Cayce Foundation.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, they originally gave, I believe, around $80,000 because they were interested in a prophecy by Edgar Cayce that said there was, the Hall of Records for Atlantis was under the left paw of the Sphinx.
Okay, yeah.
So they gave money for us, well, for them to go and do seismic soundings around the enclosure to see if there was actually a cavity. And they did find that there was a cavity. However, there's so much political wrangling about any kind of drilling or excavation on the Giza Plateau. And the gentleman who is the head of the Giza Plateau, who's famous and infamous at the same time, Zahi Hawass, he objected to this the entire premise of this project, and unfortunately now he's the head of the entire archaeological division. I mean, luckily at the time there was another gentleman that was head of antiquities in Cairo, so we were able to get permission through him. But I mean, when we showed up for the first day of shooting, when we finally did the documentary, Zahi basically said, "You don't have permission," even though we had the permit in our hands, and made us sort of sit around and wait, and stupid phone calls went back and forth, and you know, we've got 25 bags of equipment, and finally, you know, we got permission to shoot in the Giza Plateau.
He's the keeper of the cannon.
Yes, and it's sort of frustrating that he wouldn't even let them, you know, drill a small hole into that chamber and put in one of those orthoscopic cameras.
That can be just like a thread almost.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, to me, it seems so unproductive. You know, okay, so we'll do the Geraldo thing. We'll get in there, and maybe there won't be anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but why not just take a look?
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
You had presented to him and to the world the overall premise behind what you were doing, having to do with the different erosion, and you have a different take on the parameters of what constitutes Egyptology and study thereof.
What they had done is they had taken the premise to a geological convention, and so they were fully supportive.
This is on the alternate erosional pattern.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
So once they got sort of peer approval, shall we say, then they went to, I don't know quite all the whole story, but eventually they went to Zahi, and he just really objected to this. I mean, vociferously. I mean, there's some very funny clips, and I think we used one of them, which might not have been the most politically advantageous thing to do, because you never really want to ridicule someone in public, because then you have no place, they have no place to hide, you know, when you want to go back and maybe make friends with them again.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of trouble with that with Galileo and Copernicus when they were saying that the Earth was the center of the universe. Right. Everybody's identity is wrapped up in that, and when you bring along something new, the Catholic Church only let Galileo off the hook about 15 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, even, you know, we can sort of make fun of the Catholic Church because they're not scientists. I think when it gets frustrating is when people are allegedly following the scientific method, and yet they are acting as emotional as one would be as if they were defending the faith. It
becomes political. Or did you ever see the way they fight in their academic about who's going to be the provost or something? They fight like dogs, or over how many angels can dance on the head of a dialectical interpretation of the 3rd century of a historical pattern. And they will get very, very involved egotistically or otherwise in their premise, yeah.
But I think it's easier to understand when people are sort of defending their faith, and it's harder to understand when you're supposedly following an objective method that's grounded in science
right.
and
evidence, the scientific method, yeah,
and you know, objectivity. And I think that it's very hard to understand. But I mean, it's actually easy to understand because you realize that people's emotions, as you say, their ego, their career, their identity is so wrapped up.
Sometimes economic, political patterns. Or that fellow who he originally took it to, and he had the head, and then he showed the head.
Right.
The guy said it was. Did he stick with his thing that was an evidence of erosional patterns?
Well, how could he not? You know. I mean, he just wouldn't go on the record because of the implications.
Well, that's interesting, but he would stick with the original thing.
I can't remember the.
No, but if you understand what I'm saying.
You'd have to talk to John West.
Yeah, right. John West is the one who's behind this. Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Eventually, hopefully, we could get John West on your show.
Sure, why not?
He's sort of holed up in upstate New York, and he doesn't really like New York City.
Doesn't like New York City? There's something wrong with the man.
Well, things always seem to happen. I mean, we brought him down to New York, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'll deal with the parking situation." And somehow, literally, I read the sign wrong, and he got a ticket. So
he didn't get towed, did he?
No, he didn't get towed.
That's the 7th layer of Dante's hell, when you get towed.
I understand, but I feel like I have a PhD in parking in New York. And yet, even with me looking at the signs, I still read it wrong, and I've looked at these signs, you know, many, many times and never gotten a ticket.
Yeah.
And it was just funny that since it was his car that he got. I mean, of course, I paid for the ticket because, you know, he was my guest. But it was just funny that, you know, people have a certain idea that New York's going to grab a hold of you and you're going to get sucked into the
God,
vortex.
if there is one up there, would be laughing.
So you see...
At the human condition and all our foibles,
You don't believe in God?
I'm not able to say one way or another,
What do you mean you're not able to say?
I'm not able to say. It's not a thing. We don't want to discuss that now.
I'm fascinated.
But no, that's a whole other thing away from this. But the idea of the scientific process is something, and the scientific method is very valuable, and you're right. People are upset when they've got identities wrapped up in
whenever it seems that there's an anomaly,
something that's being subsumed within another context, a new paradigm.
Right. I mean, whenever there's an anomaly, it's much easier to throw it out than to look for ways of changing the paradigm to to accommodate that anomaly.
Well, a paradigm is a whole collection of interrelated aspects to a changed view of things, not just a singular thing. So it's a whole nother, like heliocentric, geocentric.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of things. And they were still trying to protect all kinds of ways, those orbit pathways, irregularities of Jupiter in order to keep the geocentric view. Right up for hundreds of years they were trying to do that.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think that what's fascinating to me about this documentary is that we were able to take real science and get peer reviewed by real scientists.
Yeah, I heard you say you had taken it to them, the geology community.
The geology convention, and since they didn't have any attachment to the repercussions of the conclusions.
Yeah, no grants or something.
Yeah, that they were actually able to look at it with open eyes as opposed to worrying about the implications.
Yeah, the implications to their career, maybe, or
right.
something. Yeah, or and you've gotten general acceptance by the geologic community that water erosion, that's it's clearly evidence of water erosion.
Absolutely.
And that's verified by people. That's a fact you have before you to deal with in terms of the chronology of developments on the Giza Plateau.
Well, that takes it to another level. Then we had a paleoclimatologist who projected that when there was that kind of rain in the Sahara, it would push it back to a certain time period.
Yeah, I guess it's around 10,000 years, 10,000 years.
Well, if
it was savanna, it wasn't desert.
Well, it's
like
actually
15,000
BC.
Is it that far back? Yeah, okay.
Because if you take...
That's in the fossil record, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and these dates aren't, perfect, but if I remember, the Old Kingdom is about 4,000 BC.
That's what I think of generally, yeah.
Or 2,000. I mean, regardless...
BC, yeah.
Whatever the projected dates are, this pushes it back at least 5,000 to 10,000 years before that.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. And it would comport with the kind of erosion characteristic that Mr. West found.
Well, and what's fascinating is that other structures, as you saw from the video, allegedly from the same time period, which is the Old Kingdom, are... if you put them side by side, they're so radically different. Yeah. There is just absolutely no way that they could have happened.
It doesn't comport with the different kind of metamorphic or
you mean the type of rock?
Type of rock, yeah. Or
basically, they were comparing limestone with limestone because actually on the Sphinx, there's two types of rock involved. Yeah. As you saw from the animation, it's carved into the ground, except for the head, which is actually a granite outcropping.
It is an outcropping from which it comes? I mean, it's a larger granite outcropping that the body is also part of?
No, the body is limestone.
Okay.
And then where the head is actually a granite outcropping.
Okay, and that's interesting, yeah.
So there's a different erosional feature. Yeah. I mean, there is some water erosion on the head, but since granite is much harder than limestone it has a different weathering. It's
an interesting geological structure, too, if that's the case. That's where did that come from?
But what they did was they compared limestone with limestone. When they put the two structures together, from the Old Kingdom and from the Sphinx, those are huge limestone pieces. And so what I'm saying is that there are the similar types of rock that's involved.
Well, those are two different kinds of geologic things, a metamorphized and or a sedimentary and everything. But it's interesting. But it comes down, and so then the thrust of the documentary is that this means that the Sphinx is much older than is generally accepted by the academic community.
Exactly.
Okay, big theme that upsets people.
Big thing.
And they had a lot of reaction against the overall premise, I presume.
Everybody was furious. And it was very successful, too. I mean, the documentary was, got incredible ratings.
Good. And that was, when did the documentary air?
It aired in, I think, the fall of '93.
Fall of
And
'93.
we finished shooting in the spring of. We went to Egypt in February of '93. March.
Right.
Just after they had blown up the World Trade Center
Downtown.
for the
yeah.
first time.
Yeah, yeah, in '93. They didn't bring it down then, though. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I don't know if you know this, but they've.
This is 9/11 today that we're talking.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
At the time, people were worried about going to Egypt because they were blowing up tourists.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they had a big shootout down at Aswan, didn't they? with
Well,
the
no,
terrorism?
actually, it was Hatshepsut, which is near Luxor.
Okay.
And that was, quite a few years ago.
Mm.
But they were still blowing up tour buses. These were people that were allegedly trying to destabilize the Egyptian government because, Egypt doesn't have oil, so therefore they're very highly dependent on tourism, so that the way you can destabilize the government is to scare the tourists so they won't come.
Right.
So my brother and I had this great opportunity to go, and, since there's only two of us...
Connected with this film.
Yes, he was actually higher up on the feeding chain than I was.
Uh-huh.
He was the associate producer,
Yeah.
and he worked in the editing. I only got to go to Egypt, which was very exciting.
You were doing lighting?
I was actually the dolly grip.
Dolly grip. That's a different.
Well, I was pushing
role.
the camera.
Okay. Okay.
We had a skateboard dolly.
Yeah, you would. You want that rather than zoom. Yeah.
Well,
On many shots, yeah, I would think.
yeah, a dolly is always preferable to a zoom.
Yeah.
Because you actually you're moving through space.
Yes,
As
yes.
opposed to just doing it optically.
I understand. Yeah.
But regardless, so I asked my mother, I said, well, your only two children are going into sort of the lion's den. What do you think? Should we go?
Together they're going
Yeah,
at the
together
same time.
at the same time. And
this is the end of the line.
well, and we don't have any kids, and so I really want to go, and so she said, "A coward dies 1,000 deaths, a brave man dies just one." And so I thought, great, let's go for it.
Okay.
And so anyway, so off we went, and everybody in New York at the time was like, how can you go to Egypt? They're blowing up tourists. And I said, well, I could stay here in New York and get blown up by Egyptian terrorists. I mean, you're not safe anywhere. I mean, to think that somehow you're going to avoid your destiny, if that's the case, by running away from it, it doesn't seem, anywhere safe.
About that same time, I was going in and out of Libya, a revolutionary country that everybody had marked as a terrorist state and all of that, and with great regularity and everything.
Well, what was it like when you went?
Wonderful. Just
Really?
wonderful. I think that's a really important model that they have there. Yeah, I think Libya
Important
is...
model?
Oh, yeah.
How
yeah.
so?
I don't want to go into it because it's
sorry,
often another
fascinating.
subject. It has to do with the structure of the modern world and everything like that. I
I
think he's
see.
in advance of the world paradigm, the same way the United States was in advance of the feudal paradigm 225 years ago. That the system we're operating this planet with is outdated, and we need a new one. And his model maybe have the singular parts of
You
it
mean
that are relevant to the
Gaddafi's
social...
model?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's in advance of humanity, what they're
In
doing.
advance?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I happen to think that. But we were going in, but that,
And-
you were
and-
being
and-
smuggled. You had to be smuggled in. You had to go back to
But
back
what about
roads and
things
all
like
that stuff.
human rights or freedom of speech?
Don't want to go into all
I'm
that.
fascinated.
We're talking about
Okay.
the Giza Plateau.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll have you on my show.
And I had hitchhiked through Egypt. I went to I got thrown in jail in Egypt one time.
For
yeah.
what?
Well, it was a long story, but I was just hitchhiking through the Middle East and went up to a guy and said, "Where's the road that goes to Cairo out of Port Said?" It was in '57, and they had just bombed, and so there was a great bad feeling about them. And I said, "The road." I was going to hitchhike. They didn't know what hitchhike meant, and I said to him, "The road goes along the Suez Canal. I'd seen it on the map up to Ismailia." And he stepped and called a cop, and they put me in jail because they were very upset. They'd been bombed by the British and the French, if you remember. And so I wasn't very worried until I finally got to a guy who could speak English and knew what auto stop meant or hitchhike.
I see.
And he said, "Are you crazy? You'd better not be walking around here
Well,
saying you're an American."
I'm not saying that you should go play in heavy traffic, but
I was too dumb to know
well,
that there was any problem.
I knew that there were problems in Egypt, but there was something that said, I have to go on this journey. And
well, it ended up he wanted to give me he was an officer, so he knew from this. And he said, "You're crazy." So I started speaking Spanish, saying I was Spanish. And he wanted to give me a private to hitchhike with me in the truck if I got a ride to go to Cairo. It was really funny. We got out, but that was another thing. That's Egypt, and there's other stories.
The interesting thing was when I went, I was so surprised at how pro-American people were. I mean, I never had the feeling that I was in any danger whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a woman, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was kind of funny because I was dressed all in khaki,
mm-hmm.
Because it's the desert, and everybody called me doctor because they thought I was an archaeologist.
Figures, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were horrified that I was the one that was carrying around all the equipment because
unseemly, huh?
Well, no, but
they
they couldn't understand why all these guys were standing around because we had the producer who's this big burly guy and Boris Said, and then we had Bill Cody, and he was the director.
He's the director, yeah.
And then my brother, who's the sound man.
He's large. He's a good
and he's
guy.
a tall guy. And then we had, John Anthony West.
Okay.
And he's our talent. And we had Robert Schock, who's also our talent.
Right.
So they're all in front of the camera.
Academics, yeah.
Or above the line, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And myself and this other guy were sort of schlepping everything around.
Right.
And they just couldn't understand why all these big guys were
standing around watching you schlep.
Watching me, heave around all this equipment. And I was just so happy to have a job.
Yeah,
And this, to me, was so exciting to be with. And Robert Watts was there. Our executive producer also produced Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Wow. That's huge.
That's how we got into NBC. I mean, the way it works a lot of times is that your executive producer merely sets up the deal, and they can just do it on a handshake.
Right.
And maybe you only see them once. I mean, he came along on the journey.
That's the way the world largely works.
But because of that handshake, we were able to get financing for NBC. So he was worth every penny that we paid.
You got the financing from NBC?
Well,
or who green-lighted it in a sense? He did.
He did. I mean, we had investors as well. I mean, that was another insane thing, is that if you gave $10,000, you could bring 2 people on the trip, right? So we were shooting and we were entertaining the investors at night because they were watching us shoot the movie. And John West was, he also gave tours.
Egypt, right. Yeah.
So he was kind of shooting with us, giving a tour for the investors. And, so it was a bit like the Paris-Dakar rally. I mean, we were up shooting dawns, and then we were shooting sunset, and then at night, because we were the crew, we were part of the sideshow, and there to sort of entertain the investors, who were a fascinating group of people. We had people from the Fire Society.
Must have been fun in a lot of ways. It was like a movie. Making a movie is like it's like a movie,
Yeah, but we didn't sleep. I didn't sleep for a month.
Really? Oh, you can't sleep for a month. I mean, but
it was very little sleep. As
Really?
I said, it was like the Paris-Dakar rally.
I don't know the Paris-Dakar.
Well, it's an endurance drive that you drive from, Africa to Paris.
Oh, I see. I see. I see. I didn't know that.
It's just crazy, and you're out in the desert.
Right.
And I mean, like, the only time we had one camera, a Betacam that we were using, and the only time the camera ever jammed was at that one place where all that wind erosion, when we were shooting all that wind erosion. And that's a bit panicking when you don't have backup. I mean, because you can't afford to bring a $30,000 extra camera.
Yeah, right. Betacam is.
And we had some time-lapse cameras too, but they weren't, you couldn't shoot sound with
What
them.
kind of a ratio did you end up with in terms of footage in the piece and how much was shot? Did you ever get to that?
Since I wasn't really involved in the editing, I can't remember what the ratio was, but I'm sure it was pretty high. I mean, 10 to 1, 20 to 1, something like that.
And you did it all on Final Cut or Avid or what?
Avid. That's the days when Avid
was the Cadillac.
The only thing.
The only thing. Okay.
I mean, you know, sure you could
Yeah,
offline
Media
it on.
100 or something they had.
I can't remember all the
yeah.
call numbers, but I mean, it used to be that you would offline on 3/4 inch, and then you would online on 1 inch, and then the Avid came along, and you know, you would do it at a low resolution, and then the online you would do it at a high resolution.
Yeah.
So that, you know, you would render for days or, you know, for certain things. I mean, and we had a lot of animation sequence. That actually was probably the most expensive.
Yeah, a lot of the high-end production companies do that. They have a videotape thing to do rough cuts and all that kind of stuff. Because it's much simpler, and then you get the real thing.
And then you go into an online situation.
Yeah, right. But it's an expensive proposition to get a major feature like that, and it's so well done. You had to get also some very good animation footage that showed the principle. And that was really difficult.
I think that was the most expensive part.
It was. It was interesting that was. I think those costs are coming down now, don't you, from 93, I think.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is coming down.
Isn't it wonderful that everything is coming down? You can do it all on your desktop, practically.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you've got enough hard drives.
Yeah, if you've got enough server space or something, yeah. No, but it is getting encouraging. More and more people can do some really good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I had a friend, Dabdut Das, he was a serious out of India, and he had access to whatever he wanted and everything, and he liked Final Cut better than Avid. You know, he used Final Cut. He said he thought it was a better system. And Final Cut's available to everybody, whereas Avid used to be a Cadillac, very expensive and so forth for the big houses.
Right.
So I don't know where that all stands now, but technology is liberating and making available the capability for the citizens to do production.
Well, I agree.
Which means you're getting very democratized and you're getting a lot of schlock, obviously.
I don't know if the content has gotten any better.
Well, all right, that's the thing, yeah.
I mean, what's interesting to me is I find that, you know, after working in Hollywood for many years, is that you can always get great technicians. What's difficult to find is people that can write well or act well or that really have interesting content. You know, it's so much easier to stick to sort of a formula on those respects.
Yeah. Although the less money involved, the less do you have to stick to a formula like they do on Broadway, because there's so much money involved that you can't take a chance on something avant-garde or something. But now there's a chance for avant-garde things or new ideas, or like your program, which had a thing that ran against the canon, so you weren't going to not be able to do that at a certain time because the cost would be so much that you couldn't possibly get it past any financing that makes it possible for you to do it. You can do it now in a way that historically we haven't been able to, because they were tied into the economic model more than people are becoming, I think. Which is democratizing things.
I would love to see that. It's just, I find that good writing is still not something that seems to be evident.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that are well written, but I think that if you can have something that's well written and well acted, this I'm switching
metaphor
to drama.
Yeah, right.
Most of the technical stuff is forgivable. I mean, there's some. You got to be able to see it, and you've got to be able to hear it. If the sound's not good, forget it. It's unwatchable.
Well, okay, those things. I was just thinking back in the old days, in the 30s or 40s, every screen, Mr. Mayor and so forth, they had to have a screen to show that on, and there was nothing but a screen to show it on, so they had to have distribution within what they call movie theaters. Now you can make something, and you can put it on YouTube. It's available to everybody in the world. They can see the thing. Distribution is instantaneous at a certain level.
It's interesting that more movies were actually made then than there are now.
Is that, well, more movies?
Right,
but if you count all the stuff that's on YouTube and all the stuff that's being put up by people who are just cutting things on Final Cut
Pro.
Yeah, no,
I agree.
It's democratizing. Now, a lot of people think democratizing sucks because you've only got a couple people in the world who are really worth paying attention to. Democracy is not a good model if you're looking at things in an excellent standpoint. Tiger Woods really knows how to play golf. A lot of people play golf, but they don't play golf like Tiger Woods. You understand what I'm saying? So
well, I agree.
You're looking for the unique something that'll get eyeballs to have an advertising schedule that'll meet the needs of eyeballs to watch the thing. And you got to have something unusually great in order to get the people to watch it, as opposed to all the stuff that's available, particularly as there's more and more available.
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, the more people that are making movies, you would think that there would be more cream that rises to the top.
One would hope. You get a big pattern, you get information overload, then you can get pattern recognition coming out of it. There's got to be some place where they're going to recognize the good things that are available in that huge amount of multimedia that's going to become available. They're going to be morphing to the cell phone with distribution now. So you're going to end up with 6 billion people with a television channel. And so, you know, there's going to
don't you think you lose a little bit when you're watching it on your cell phone versus...
Well, that's another issue. But I mean, but it's going in that direction compared to what we're coming out of in the past. I mean, it just seems to me self-evident that's the case. And there's a lot of people who, and the economic models, this is huge. But we're getting far afield from the Giza. And those are all things that spin off in terms of that. But you were able to do that. So it aired, and then it had a tremendous success. I mean, it had a huge viewership. It outdid another very popular program.
Home Improvements.
Home Improvements?
Yeah.
It outdid that. I mean, in terms of the ratings when it showed.
When it showed.
Wasn't it a 60-minute segment or something?
Yes.
That they got better viewership on your program on NBC than CBS with their iconic 60-minute airing? I thought I heard that among some of the talk.
I hadn't heard of anything up against 60 Minutes.
Oh, okay.
I think we were up against Home Improvements in the NBA.
Oh, the NBA is the basketball?
Yeah.
Well, that's different. I don't know.
I'm just saying.
Okay. We'll have to get that one nailed down. But it was very it got good ratings.
And
it did very well, and it must have been satisfying to you all that were involved in it.
It was. I tell you, the most exciting thing was when we got to go to the Emmys, and won.
Yes, to win an Emmy was a major thing.
That was really exciting.
Where was that held?
It was at the Plaza.
At the Plaza here in New York. That was held. And did the whole crew go, or how many of you do they let in on that when they're doing it?
At that point, well, you can let in as many people as you want. You basically buy tables.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You know, it's a huge dinner awards ceremony. I mean, it wasn't televised because, see, there's different types of Emmys. There's the daytime Emmys, there's the documentary Emmys, you know, I guess there's the evening Emmys for all the shows on evening. This was for documentaries.
Yeah.
And so, but it was funny because I had a job in Boston, and I told the producer when I took the job, I said, okay, I'll take this job, but I have a show on the Emmys, and as long as you can get me to the Plaza on time,
get me to the Plaza on time.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
And so I had my tool bag in one hand, and I changed into my, sequin dress in the crew van, and I had my garment bag in the other, and they dumped me out at the Emmys, and so I sort of rushed into the cloakroom and said, "Here, take these bags." And,
that's fun.
But it was pretty hilarious.
What a scene! That's a movie scene that could be Academy Award winning.
And also we got lost, and coming over the Triborough Bridge is a little complicated, and. What was the music that was going on in the background? The music's important. The score is really important. It'd be something you're drumming up suspense as you miss that turn on the turnpike or something, When they make the movie, I'll make sure that they get some good...
You still keeping your hand in movie making and that sort of thing? Or are you moving over yourself into doing things that would be almost directorial or having a view of the whole thing now that they have all these things available on the computer and so forth? Are you still keeping an interest in that?
I'm just about to start a documentary on the Carib Indians in Belize.
Well, good deal. Yeah.
And as you say, since I've got Final Cut Pro, and I've got a Panasonic mini DV camera with a Leica lens on it, which, I mean, I wish I had a PAL version. We did a documentary in India with the PAL version of this. PAL has much more lines.
That's a different standard, yeah.
Well, it has more lines.
PAL's better than NTSC?
Absolutely.
It is. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize,
I believe that since the U.S. had started with NTSC before Britain and, Europe now has, they have
CCAM.
They have CCAM, but it's the same lines of resolution as PAL. Or not the same, but...
And then high definition's beckoning.
That too. But anyway, so since PAL has more lines of resolution, even when you transfer it to NTSC, you get a higher quality.
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
So, like, we had shot this documentary in India, and when you...
you and Paula?
No. This was another crew.
You did gallivant around India with Paula.
I did gallivant around
And you're
India.
putting a book together. How's the book? Is it almost published?
It is at the agency right now, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, that will be a heck of a story, because
Yeah,
you
that's
two
gonna be
together
fun.
make a real volcano of activity.
We have a lot of fun
You
together.
had a lot of fun, yeah, and she's wonderful, and you are, yes.
Um,
But you're thinking of actually shooting something then,
Well,
and you're taking advantage of all this democratization.
Absolutely. I met with two women that are Carib Indians. You know where the Caribs are.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
You know, the Caribbean.
Yes.
And so now they are an endangered native, I guess, American. I mean, since they are, you know, they're North American.
I'm not sure, but I think that the Indians that were encountered by Columbus were Carib. They may have been
Well,
Arawak. I'm not sure, but they were wiped.
When,
a lot of them were
Puerto
wiped
Rico,
out.
there you were the Taino, which
Yeah,
were
Taino,
the,
yeah,
the friendly ones, and
Yeah.
the Carib, which was the sort of mean ones. And so the I think that Columbus did encounter the Caribs and the Tainos. And
Well,
the-
I meant at San Salvador, you know, on that day. I think they were a branch of, I forget, I knew the name, Laquino or something like that, where they were identified with. Yeah, the Carib. Okay, anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah, they were Caribbean
So now they're considered by UNESCO an endangered
species. Or
peoples, I think
yeah,
is the
right,
appropriate
right.
term.
Yeah, and we're losing languages too, like
Exactly.
the lore, yeah.
So this lady who I've met that wants to do a documentary, and she and her sister have a 401c3, you know, a charity, and a website and access to grants. They want to do a documentary on the Carib Indians in Belize.
Very interesting, yeah. Belize is-
And a friend of mine who's a photographer, who's one of my neighbors, he had done a booklet on also endangered peoples in Africa that basically went, and he took photographs of places that people would tell stories about.
Right.
So he created a booklet with photographs and little blurbs and mapped this whole area in Africa, and I can't remember where exactly it was, Tanzania or Zimbabwe. So I'm hoping that with him and his credentials and my credentials, that and their credentials, we can go down with a very small crew.
Yeah.
And go and shoot, and then since I've got Final Cut Pro, we can shoot a documentary for very little money.
Oh, you could go yeah, that's right. You could do it yourself and you have it all in your control.
Right.
Do you have a theme or a notion of what you want to show? How do you storyboard the way you do in the movie? You don't do that. You just shoot. Do you have an idea that you want to illuminate?
That's
or
actually
something? Yeah,
the next thing.
The idea, then the
you start
property,
you
and
start
then
with the proposal.
Yeah.
And then we'll take that proposal and apply for some grants.
Well, okay.
And because you got to have financing. You know, I mean, that's one of the things that most filmmakers are the least successful at doing, is getting financing.
That's what the industry is largely about.
Well, and then a lot of people are good at financing, but they're not very good at distribution. And even with YouTube and all of those kind of outlets, I think that you still have to go through some kind of cable, you know.
I think everything's going to be on the cable.
Well, I think one of the problems right now
or on
with YouTube,
the fiber optic.
No, but one of the problems right now with YouTube is that you have to have broadband in order to access it.
Broadband's growing quickly. And
It's growing quickly, but still you're excluding an enormous number of people if you're just going to rely on YouTube.
Well,
and also the quality is not that high.
It's improving. It's gone to 100 megabytes, 1,000 megabytes.
Well,
now.
it went to a gig.
Yeah.
And you
that's close to pristine, at least to video.
Well, I understand,
video.
but what I'm saying is that it's not that it's not happening, but I still think that you know, you can do a multi sort of faceted distribution where you use the internet as well as cable, and so I think that it's hard to get the information out there in a really sort of cohesive way. And I think one of the problems actually with all this kind of fragmentation of the distribution,
democratization.
Well, but just hear me out.
Yeah, sure.
Is there's less money. Like, for example, you know, the only way that we were able to mount this documentary was because we got a huge amount of money from NBC. Well, the problem is, if you do the same for any of these, the Discovery Channel or National Geographic,
beautiful stuff.
There's just not the same financing available. So that in order to make one of these big documentaries happen, there's just not the budgets that there once were. So yes, you brought a lot of the costs down. Okay, you don't have to pay for the avid, but in order to get people that are really qualified to do all these documentaries, it's harder to find qualified people.
What about if you could take stuff off the internet? If you have access to the internet and you have access, suppose you had access to all the footage ever created and it's just all available to you. You can take it and cut it any way you want. You got all kinds of footage you could get, interviews. Suppose everything was available to you. You could just load it and then cut it and put it together in a certain way and get rid of the cost.
No, but the cost
of traveling and all that stuff. Or wages.
Really? Okay, think about it this way. Editing takes the longest period of time.
Well, okay.
I mean, it took Johnny and Bill 6 months to edit that.
Wow.
You know, we shot it in, we spent a month in Egypt, and they probably spent another month in Egypt.
Okay.
So, we spent 2 months shooting it. Maybe you can condense some of that stuff down.
And you were hardly getting any sleep.
Exactly. And I didn't get paid completely.
And you didn't get paid either, right? Yeah.
Well, I got paid some. And I actually had to become an investor in order to ensure that I could actually go, because it wasn't sure, and I wasn't about to not go. I mean, it was that interesting to me that I had to go.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that you still have to pay for somebody to sit down and edit it. I mean, that's one of the reasons.
Well, wait a minute. If you're doing the editing, you're taking your time. But you're not have to pay yourself for that. You're doing it because that's what you want. Suppose you got all kinds of time on your hands and this is something you want to do, like gardening or something like that.
Well,
it's not a business. It's not a business. You don't have to make money at it. You don't have to have any cost to meet. And so you're just doing it from a comfortably leisured position in the universe.
I find that people that do things for a hobby don't get anything done.
You think that really, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It used to be the amateurs were really respected. There used to be. People are doing it for the love of it rather than for the money. Most people are used to they have to get something back for what they do. They have to get rewarded, or they have to get more bread, or they get to eat pound cake and bread, or something.
I think it's different. I think
it's all materialistic.
No, I think it's different. I think that, for example, the reason why, my mother says the reason why you go to college is you pay them to discipline you.
Well, that's what I said before. What we started off talking about it. They want to. It's all about getting. It's all about getting a job where you can do something meaningful and you can get to eat bread and and
it's
you
one
get
of these things.
It's all materialistically oriented.
When I went to college, I was fascinated by what I was studying, but I probably would not have read all those books if I didn't know that the professor was
going to give you a grade.
It's not a question of a grade.
Not a grade. Okay, what is it?
It had a question of, when I showed up to class and I wasn't prepared, and he called on me and I didn't know the answer, then I would have felt that I had not fulfilled my duty, so to speak.
Duty to him?
Just as a student, as, not wasting my parents' money.
Money again?
Well,
money?
I'm just saying
people are going into debt to go listen to somebody do that when they could just learn themselves. You can learn what you want.
It's different.
The metaphor for autodidactic. You're teaching yourself because that's what you're interested in. Not what somebody tells you have to do.
All I'm saying is that I do not know if I would have I would not have finished the papers. I almost dropped out of college because I went to a university that didn't have grades. It was either
really. I didn't know they had such.
It was either satisfactory or unsatisfactory.
Well, that's still a grading thing.
It's a grading thing, but if you turned in a C paper, it was deemed unsatisfactory. So what they would make you do is they would make you rewrite the paper until it was a B or above.
It's very counter to my thinking
No, but
about
it was let me put it this way.
Well, that's what it's teaching you to do,
let me
is
just
accept
finish.
authority and the canon.
No, it wasn't about that. It really was interesting to me. It helped me a lot when I was writing because they taught me how to write. And so, like, for example, when I was writing this book,
the one by you and Polly, and
I've edited probably 50 to 70 times.
50 or 70 times?
Yep.
You've gone through the whole book?
I have gone through and changed stuff on like one page.
What's that thing they used to have, White and Stunk or something, or that book that everybody read about style of writing and creative
Oh, I know,
writing and
E.B.
everything?
White.
Yeah, that was, no, not E.B. White, no, it was a
Strunk
form.
and whatever.
That's it, yeah, everybody had that on how to form a sentence, a declarative sentence, and they have all these rules of grammar and structure.
Yeah, but this was, you don't just edit things just for grammar.
No, but for creativity and that.
But,
I mean,
you know, it's...
I find the people who try to go in a creative writing class, they drop out. Because somebody's trying to teach you. If you do it, you just do it. You just do it. You just start learning. Or you start learning.
You don't think that an editor can help your writing?
Well, I suppose they can in a certain sense, but I just think that...
I think you have issues with authority.
Yeah, very much. And
See,
the whole world is authoritarian, the way they've got it set up.
It depends
and
on
it's the market that sets the template for everything, virtually.
It depends on
and that's
how...
wrong. That's why Mr. Gaddafi is relevant.
Think
Maybe,
about
yeah.
things as... If you think
Different.
things are wrong...
Yeah, or inappropriate to what the future requires, and
if
things
you can
we've
think
inherited
of it
out of history.
an editor or a teacher as a facilitator.
Well, I like autodidact. You're teaching yourself, and you got creativity, and you got curiosity, and run with that. And
But
that's
if
what we
you-
should keep alive in
If
people.
if you have fabulous teachers... Are we running out of time?
No, you got about a minute. So get it all in about the Giza. Yeah, we got a minute and a half. These are all other issues and everything like that. But
well,
yeah.
what's your burning question about the Giza Plateau?
Well, only that it was this thing, and where does it stand now? Has it been accepted in the annals of academia,
it's
or
still
are they
actually,
still fighting it?
Shock and John West are still trying to get Zahi Hawass to get 2 people that he feels are qualified to counter the argument, and then John West and Shock will get 1 other person, and they'll form a panel, and they'll discuss it in front of, I can't remember if it was going to be in front of a mediator. And then also, I really would love it if they would drill a hole and go into the chamber.
Yeah, because that
find out for once
that
and
goes
for
back
all.
to Mr. Casey. He
Exactly.
was good. And look, we're coming to the end. I'm sorry, and it is here. We want to make it clear that it's narrated by Charlton Heston. It's a major documentary, and it's called The Mystery of the Sphinx. And we show you, this is the DVD cover, and then there's others you can Google. We'll put up the website where they can go to this, Mr. West and so forth. And they're putting forth a very interesting idea. And this is the way that we progress, because people come up with different ideas. Some people are aghast and so forth. I like the idea of coming up with new ideas and all that kind of thing. And I think that's really important. And I know I watch it, having watched it. It was very well done. And even those who want to learn how to put together a good production, you can learn by watching this. All those people who are just becoming amateur developers of film and television programming, you could learn from the way that people put this one together. It's really well done. Congratulations to you and your brother and all the people involved.
Thanks again.
Always good talking to you, Molly. Thanks a lot for coming in. Your pleasure to have the perceptions then of her, and we thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. Thanks very much, and Molly, once again, thanks for everything.